The vast, ruined dome of the celestial court hung silent above the two final figures, the ancient grand architect and Xingai, still enclosed in the armor of transcendent sorrow. The air was a heavy spiritual vacuum, filled only with the echoes of the cosmic conflict that had just concluded. Xingai's massive, armored hand relaxed slightly on the hilt of the Star Reader blade, the weapon of his defiance, now a sign of his ultimate surrender. He looked at the grand architect, finally understanding the true, terrifying scale of his role. The river of silent tears had not chosen him to be a hero, but a repository. "I sought an end to my grief," Xingai repeated, his voice hollowed by acceptance. "I sought oblivion, or freedom, and you have found purpose," the grand architect replied, his voice gentle but firm. "Purpose is the highest form of freedom, child of the river." The architect moved toward the center of the plaza, where the massive, runic disc known as the heavenly seal of eternal balance glowed with a faint, insistent light. "The existence of this cosmos is a spiritual debt," the architect explained, tracing the ancient glyphs with his staff. "The old gods fled that debt, seeking only joy and power, leaving a void that would eventually be filled by chaos. This seal requires an anchor, a soul capable of absorbing the collective weight of universal despair without breaking. Joy is too light. Rage is too volatile. Only deep, true, permanent sorrow possesses the inertia necessary to hold reality stable." Xingai lifted the starter high above his head, the blade catching the pale, spectral light of the celestial court. "My life was defined by the unending river," he declared, "the finality absolute. Let my eternity be the same. I will become the anchor. I will become the god of sorrow." The grand architect lowered his head, a gesture of profound respect, and received my final blessing and the final truth. The architect stepped away from the seal, his gaze fixed on Xingai. His old, wizened face seemed to shed millennia of worry. "Your name, Xingai, meant starfire," he began, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "A temporary, bright, violent flicker. That flicker is what allowed you to fight. But the fire must now be quenched, replaced by the deep, enduring light of the anchor. The armor you wear, forged from your travels and your grief, is not a prison. It is the catalyst. It is the spiritual filtering system that will allow you to process the pain of existence without collapsing reality upon itself. You must not discard it. You must internalize it. You must become the sorrowful armor." And the Star Reader, the architect, continued, pointing to the blade. "It represents the will to resist the inevitable. That will must be the first thing you surrender. Plunge the blade not into the stone, but into the spiritual fabric before the seal. Let your last act of violence be the end of your resistance. From this moment forward, you will not feel the unique pain of one individual. You will feel the average pain of all things. The sting of a betrayal will be yours, but so will the counterweight of a million silent acts of kindness. You will be the balance, not the victim. And I," the architect whispered, looking down at his own frail hands, "I've completed my watch. To guide the new god is my last and only function. Once you are seated, I am released. I wish you the only peace available to a god. Xingai, the peace of absolute necessity." Xingai gave a silent final salute with the Star Eater. He swung the blade not with rage, but with perfect, contained sorrow. The Star Eater hit the air precisely above the seal. It did not make a sound, but instantly dissolved into a downward drushing torrent of dark, flowing light. The light was channeled directly into the luminous glyphs of the heavenly seal. The sword was gone, its defiance transformed into foundational energy. "The pivot is ready," the architect said, stepping back into the shadows. "Step onto your throne." Shanghui Xingai took the final, heaviest step of his long journey, planting his armored boots firmly onto the central disk of the seal. The light was no longer pale or insistent. It was a blinding, crystalline column that erupted around him, shooting up through the court's dome and into the boundless void. The noise was not a sound, but a vibration, the resonant hum of all cosmic law snapping into place. The armor of transcendent sorrow began its final transformation. The metallic joints and dark plating liquefied instantly, turning into pure, deep indigo water, the very essence of the river of silent tears. The water was absorbed, seeping into the crystalline matrix of the seal, while simultaneously being drawn inward to Xingai's core. He felt the dissolution of his physical form. His flesh, his blood, his mortal remnants were replaced by pure spiritual energy, condensed and locked by the power of the seal. He felt the overwhelming confluence of universal suffering wash over him. It was the crushing weight of every star that had ever collapsed. It was the acute terror of the hunt and the consuming loneliness of exile. He felt joy, too sharp, contrasting pain of things lost or things he could never personally possess. But the conditioning of the armor held. He did not break. He accepted, absorbed. The sorrow became a foundational element, an eternal gravitational pull, not a disruptive force. His legs were the first to solidify. They became massive pillars of polished midnight blue crystal, permanently fused to the seal beneath him. His posture was locked into a state of unwavering, stoic watchfulness. The liquid conversion moved upward, replacing his torso with the crystalline shell. His spiritual heart, the core that housed his identity, became a slow, swirling vortex of deep purple-blue light, the ultimate collector of cosmic trauma. The pain, once overwhelming, became a constant, predictable low tide, perpetually managed by the new engine of his divinity. He was no longer a person feeling sadness. He was the concept of sorrow made manifest and utilized. The process reached his helmet, the final shell. The metal dissolved, revealing his features beneath. His face solidified into a perfect, crystalline sculpture of passive, profound grief, a face that would never smile, never frown, only endure. Where his eyes had been, too deep, dark pools of liquid sorrow swirled endlessly, reflecting the eternal river. He was immutable, immortal, and fixed. The wandering god was lost. The watchman was found. The pillar of light around him reached its zenith, then slowly, majestically receded. The statue of the new god, Shanghui, the perpetual watchman, stood sentinel. The grand architect approached the crystalline form, a tear of pure light running down his cheek. He looked upon the perfection of the sacrifice, the eternal serenity achieved through eternal pain. "I name you Shanghui, the unmoving watchman," he whispered, bowing deeply before the crystalline figure. "Your function is to stabilize the soul economy of the cosmos, to ensure that despair never achieves critical mass. The illusion of the celestial court will be maintained. The marshals will continue their watch, but they now serve a god who is both foundation and fate." The architect straightened, his purpose completely fulfilled. The spiritual energy that had bound his ancient form together, the very power he had used to maintain the court's facade, began to leave him. He felt the gentle pull of release, the end of a duty that had spanned uncountable millennia. He smiled, a genuine, joyful release that smoothed the lines from his face, the last smile the court would ever witness. His simple cotton robe fell empty to the marble plaza. Grand architect's physical presence, his long-sustained spiritual anchor, dissipated into a shower of golden dust that vanished immediately. Only the silent, immovable, perpetual watchman remained, eternally fixed upon the heavenly seal. Across the universe, a silent, profound, cosmic shift occurred. Not a shockwave, but a calibration. A farmer named Alara, whose son had been taken by a plague, stood at the edge of her fields, preparing to end her life in despair. The weight of her grief was a physical presence, crushing her chest, demanding her annihilation. Suddenly, the absolute pressure eased, not the grief, but the annihilating despair. A feeling of profound yet distant sadness permeated her own, grounding it, preventing it from spiraling out of control. She still wept, but she found the strength to step back from the brink. The cosmos had taken the excess weight. She picked up her hoe. Life was still pain, but it was now possible. The archdemon of malice, Xanthos, felt the shift like an invisible, icy shackle tightening around his heart. His power was derived from the absolute, unfettered rage of mortals. Now that rage was no longer pure. It was subtly diluted, cooled by a constant, passive infusion of sorrowful resignation. Xanthos screamed, a sound of pure frustration, as his demonic essence felt the ceiling of absolute chaos lower forever. He could still inflict pain, but the power to end the world through pure emotional overload had been removed. The new god had anchored the emotional limits of the universe. Martial Yin, standing guard below, felt a sense of clarity he hadn't known since the old gods vanished. His authority was hollow, his mission ceremonial, but his focus was absolute. He looked at the gate, which now emanated the cool blue-white light of the watchman's power. "He is the still point," Marshal Yin murmured to the silent guards. "The chaos is over." The Jade Serpent guards, their own spiritual fatigue instantly stabilized, stood taller, accepting their new, eternal, and perfectly futile duty. They would maintain the illusion of the court, eternally serving the silent crystal anchor. In the center of the celestial court, the perpetual watchman remained, fixed and unmoving. His purpose was complete. His existence, a permanent silent vigil. The god of sorrow held the line, eternally ensuring that while suffering would exist, its scale would never again threaten to fracture the very fabric of existence. Shingai had sacrificed everything to become the only true, perfect god the cosmos would ever need. The river of silent tears flowed through his core, guaranteeing the eternal balance. The end.